Hi guys, it's Sat with the Premier Property Marketing team, and with the advanced polls opening up today for our federal election, we thought it'd be a great time to make a quick video and talk about each party running and specifically about their policies around housing. We know at this time of the year there's a ton of information that's out there with the elections, so we thought we'd just really summarize each point from each party and to give you a little bit more information so you guys are informed when you go out there to vote. We're not going to dive into too much detail and interpret each policy and what that impact could have on our local economy, but if that's something you guys want to talk about, we're always happy to do it. You can shoot us a quick DM, email, message us, and we're definitely will happy to get into that with you. So let's get into it. Let's start off with the Conservatives. So the Conservative Party, they've come out really with a 4-point plan, is what they call it. And point one of that plan is to fix the mortgage stress test. So everybody's heard about it. The mortgage stress test is a hot topic. It was all over the news. If you're not familiar with it, essentially what it is a test to pre-qualify home buyers. So if you're looking to buy a home today, essentially what the banks and the government is saying is in the event that interest rates were to go up, would you be able to pay your mortgage or not? And in order to protect people so they're not, qualifying for more or biting off more than they can chew, is to get them qualified at a higher rate, even though they're going to pay the lower rate, which we have today. That's kind of it in a nutshell. We can definitely get into specifics if you guys want to. And what they're looking to do is change it. So they haven't come up with any more details other than that. They've simply said that they would look to change that. There have been a lot of groups lobbying to change that for the last 12 to 16 months, but nothing has really come into place. So it would be interesting to know exactly what they intended to do with that, but at this point, all they've said is that they would consider changing it, but that's really it. So that's point number one. Point number two of their 4-point plan is to extend amortizations for first-time buyers. So as a first-time home buyer, the maximum period that you have to pay off your mortgage is 25 years. And this is specific only to people who are putting less than 20% down. If you are putting 20% or more down on your property for a down payment, this does not affect you and you are able to, extend your loan to 30 years. But otherwise, the maximum is 25. And what they're looking to do is push this 30. So what does that really mean? What that means for homeowners is if you have the same loan and you just extend the time to pay it back over by 5 extra years, is this reducing your monthly payment? So that's what they're trying to do, is they're trying to make it a little bit more affordable for first-time home buyers by reducing that monthly payment burden that you would have when you buy a new property. So that would be point number two. And getting into three would be to launch an inquiry into the impact of money laundering. We've all heard about it, especially in the Vancouver market, and the Liberals did do a lot of this already into looking into that. And again, with the Conservatives, there's not too much detail on this topic, but by the sounds of it, they would be looking into money laundering as Canada as a whole, not specific to certain markets like the Liberals did. They would launch a campaign into looking at it all throughout Canada. Point number four, they would open up surplus federal land for housing development. This is actually an interesting one because they're the only party that touches on this. And again, not a lot of detail as to what is surplus land or where the surplus land is, but they've simply said that they would open that up for housing development. I do really like that because this party's really touched on the supply side of housing, whereas all the other policies that you really see are focused on the demand side. So that's really a key thing to note on that. One other point that they did make is that they would exempt mortgage renewals from the stress test. So just like we talked about with the stress test, if you have a current mortgage, and let's say you have a 3-year or 5-year term, when that term is supposed to come up, you have to renew your mortgage. A lot of times people just go back to their same bank and renew it, but that's not always the case. You can go to other banks or competitors if they're able to offer you a better rate, better terms, better service, whatever it may be. So as of right now, if you actually renew with the same bank, you're exempt and you don't need to, qualify under the stress test. But what the Conservatives are saying is that they would exempt all people, whether you went to that bank or not, from being put under this stress test if you need to re-qualify your mortgage. So that in short is pretty much the Conservatives' policies around housing. Next up, let's get into the Liberals. So the first point the Liberals have made here is that they would build 100,000 affordable homes over the next 10 years. That sounds really interesting, but without really having any context to compare it to, it may not really mean much to you. But the good thing is the NDP and the Green Party have come in with similar policies, and when you see those numbers, that'll be an easy way for you to kind of compare and contrast the two to see, what you'd like better. The next policy that they have here is $40,000 interest-free loans for energy-efficient renovations in your home. So this is something that the Liberals have actually already done. So they brought this into place, and anybody who's looking to renovate an older home they call it an energy efficient retrofit. So essentially what that means is if you're trying to do a renovation and you're adding energy efficient doors, energy efficient windows, for example, or you're adding solar panels to your roof or new insulation, anything that you can say is, giving your home a better energy efficiency rating, they're willing to give you these loans. Another newer initiative that they've talked about is actually a $5,000 grant for buyers who buy new homes that actually have a net zero emission rating. This is a fairly new topic, and there's still a lot of work that needs to be done on it as to what exactly makes a net zero home. So again, it sounds like a really interesting program, but I just don't know if we even have that supply of these homes on our market where this would really have an immediate impact. Next on the Liberals is a shared equity mortgage program. And again, you may have heard of this because this was actually just brought into place in August of this year. So this is actually a really interesting program. The CMHC hasn't released any numbers on how many people have actually applied and how many people have taken advantage of it. But in short, essentially what this program is for people who are still saving for a down payment. The government is essentially saying that they will share and invest in your property with you to top up your down payment to the minimum that you may need to buy a house. But in that, they're also sharing in the equity. So if you buy a home today and you sell it in 5 years and you've made an X profit, the government would also benefit from that profit, and you would have to pay them based on the percentage in the home. It's a little bit complicated. There are some constraints definitely on price thresholds as to what is the maximum price you can pay for a home that's eligible under this program. So if this is something you're interested in, we can definitely talk to you more about it or get you in touch with one of our mortgage brokers. It is an interesting program, but like we said, a one-size-fits-all approach doesn't always work. As you can see with this program, it was actually just brought in last month, and they're already looking to change it because they noticed a $500,000 price point doesn't get you very far in places like Vancouver or Victoria or even Toronto. So they're actually, in their new housing policy, they've actually mentioned that they would increase that threshold to $800,000 for those three areas. So that is a key factor for sure. And so you will notice a lot of the focus for the Conservatives and the Liberals so far has been on first-time homebuyers, and that seems to be the trend with really all the parties here. One key thing to note, though, is there is no mention of the stress test or amortization changes in their policy, which makes sense because they are the government that brought in the stress test, and they seem to be pretty strong on keeping it. Next up, we'll take a look at the NDP. So the NDP has some pretty lofty targets here. So the first thing you'll notice is they have a goal to build 500,000 new affordable homes over a 10-year period. If you remember, the Liberals had 100,000, so that's fivefold over them. Another target that they have is to inject $5 billion in the first 18 months of office. Again, no details on where this money is going to go or what they plan on doing with it. It's just a target that they've laid out. Like the Liberals, they would also offer those loans for retrofitting your homes. They haven't mentioned about the interest rates like the Liberals did. They actually said it would be interest-free. Theirs says low interest, so that's the key difference there. Otherwise, it's essentially the same for the same type of renovations. They're looking to offer a home buyer tax credit, and we'll actually not offer it to increase it. Currently, if you're a new first-time home buyer, In the first year that you purchase your home, when it comes to pay your property taxes, you actually got a $750 tax credit, and that's only for the first year. They're looking to double this, so they would make it a $1,500 tax credit that you get for the first year that you own a home. Other than that, they're offering to propose foreign buyer tax of 15% across Canada. So we've all heard about the foreign buyers tax. The way the Liberals had implemented it, it's region specific. So there's areas in Greater Vancouver and BC, and there's areas in Ontario that are affected by it. And the NDP is looking to have this go into effect all throughout Canada. The other policy that they have is about building social co-ops and nonprofit housing. So essentially they would do something like that happened in the 70s and 80s, where the government would actually come in and build housing with developers and builders and invest in these programs as cooperatives. So it's a different form of ownership, but it definitely does help in the supply of affordable housing. And that pretty much sums up the NDP. And again, you'll notice that they make no mention of any changes to the stress test or amortizations for properties, which seem to be key issues. And the last party that we're going to get into that has outlined some of their policies is going to be the Green Party. So the Green Party's come out and said that they want to build 250,000 new affordable units over the next 10 years. So again, now compared to the NDP and the Liberals, NDP came in at 500,000 and the Liberals at 100,000. And actually, in addition to that, they would want to renovate 150,000 affordable units over the same period. Again, not a lot of detail on what renovate means, but that's something that they put into place. I'd imagine it would be similar to the other energy efficient retrofits that the other parties had promised. One thing that does make the Green Party a little bit different is that they would appoint a Minister of Housing to oversee a national housing strategy. This is not something that we currently have, nor any other party has touched on, but it's something that they put into play. And then the last point that they have is that they're open to reviewing the first-time homebuyer grant. So if you're not familiar with the first-time homebuyer grant, it's essentially a saving on property transfer tax. So in Canada, when you buy property as a homeowner, there's a tax that's payable on all property except if you're a first-time homebuyer, and that's the only time you save on it. The only thing is there is a maximum threshold. So if you're above $500,000 as a purchase price, you do not get the grant. And I'd imagine that's what they're open to reviewing, is probably extending that threshold to a higher amount. So if you are a first-time home buyer, you get the benefit of that, because if these thresholds aren't changed over time, and obviously prices increase over time, they really just become obsolete. So that's what they're open to. And again, no mention here about anything to do with the stress test or changing amortization on mortgages. So really, that's it in a nutshell. If you guys really want to get into more detail as to what some of this means, especially for our local markets, we're happy to do it. So thanks, and go out and vote.